I was getting on calls with these women and I was saying, so tell me your story. And then they would tell me this fascinating story, not dramatic, just fascinating. And I'd hear their why, I'd hear their passion for what they do, I'd hear why it's so important to them. And then I would say, but there's none of that on your website. There's none of that in your marketing. Like people don't know that about you. People haven't heard that story. And then I shared my story to 1,500 women in business, and the response that I got was phenomenal. I got more paying clients in the 6 weeks after I shared my story than I had done in the previous 12 months. And that's all I'd done differently was be real and honest and share my story. So that story that you're not sharing with anybody that actually would attract people to you.
Hello and welcome to the Art of Value Whispering podcast. I'm your host, Melitta Campbell, business coach, value whisperer, and advocate for introverted female entrepreneurs and experts who want to build a business that feels natural, authentic, and impactful. Over the summer here on the show, I'm hosting the Brilliant Business Book Festival, where I'm speaking with the authors of some of my favorite business books and some of the books that I wish I'd read sooner. Today's guest is Susan Payton, author of The Business of Stories. Now, as you may tell if you're watching this on video or you've ever seen me on a video, my background is full of books, and I can tell you at least a third of those books are all about storytelling. It's a topic I love, and I can't believe we've never dedicated a full episode to it. So I'm really excited to dive in, especially as I love Susan's practical approach to storytelling and how she breaks that down to show how you can use your stories to connect with your dream clients and attract more of those right fit people into your world, how you can use stories to add genuine value and build relationships one conversation at a time. We also look at a simple structure you can use to start gathering and formatting your stories, what belongs on your homepage versus your about page, and how to share personal stories without oversharing. And perhaps most importantly, we look at the mindset shift that you need to be able to start sharing more of your stories comfortably. And as always, with the Brilliant Business Book Festival, you can find the show notes page for this episode at melittacampbell.com/podcast. And on that page, you can access Valora, my new AI assistant who will help you turn today's insights into practical steps that you can use to grow your business. And I'm loving the feedback I'm getting from listeners so far who have been really pleasantly surprised at just how relevant and helpful those steps are. This isn't just some nice fluff or reassurance. These are really practical steps that you can take this week already to turn everything you're going to hear today into momentum for your business. So you'll find that at melittacampbell.com/podcast and then navigate to this episode. Meantime, let's dive in and get Susan's insights on how we can confidently use storytelling to raise our visibility. Hi, Susan. It's great to have you with us on the show today.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. And I read your book, well, when it first came out, which was it a year ago?
2022.
Time goes way too fast.
Yeah.
And we were just chatting offline that, I've worked in communications for now 3 decades. I've always loved storytelling and dive into any book that comes out. But I've never talked about storytelling on the show as a dedicated episode. We've talked about it linked to like public speaking and social media. So I am really excited to dive into this. It's such a great topic.
Can't even taking you this long.
I know. I'm waiting for you, Susan.
So there you go.
When it comes to communicating your value in a way that feels natural and authentic, there's no better way than sharing a story. But at the same time, while storytelling can be the most natural thing that we as humans do, I know a lot of people are very nervous about it and don't know where to start. So I'm really looking forward to diving into all of that. Before we do, though, I would love to know the story behind the book. What led you to write this book?
Yeah, well, I kind of stumbled across storytelling as a thing back in 2015. I'd always loved storytelling, like you said, like it's always been part of what I do. Even way back in the day, I used to work on the Chris Tarrant Breakfast Show. If any of your listeners are from London and old enough to remember the Chris Tarrant Breakfast Show, and I used to write the stories, like the funny stories that he used to read out on air. And then I went to work for a television station, and I used to write the press releases. So there's always been a theme there, but it was only in 2015 when I started a group for women in business, and I was getting on calls with these women, and I was saying, so tell me your story. Tell me, like, what's led you here? Because I wanted to know all about them. I'm a nosy person, so this is perfect line of work for me. And then they would tell me this fascinating story, right? Not dramatic story, just fascinating, because it might be about how their father put a camera in their hand when they were 5 years old, and that was it. They were just hooked, and they had a camera in their hand ever since. And, or they would just tell me some story that would always be fascinating. And I'd hear their why. I'd hear their passion for what they do. I'd hear why it's so important to them. And then I would say, but there's none of that on your website. There's none of that in your marketing. Like, people don't know that about you. People haven't heard that story. And so I used to find myself talking about storytelling a lot. And then I shared my story to 1,500 women in business. And the response that I got was phenomenal. I got more paying clients in the 6 weeks after I shared my story than I had done in the previous 12 months. And that's all I'd done differently, was be real and honest and share my story. So 2015, the business of stories was born, and I started helping and coaching these women to share that story that you're not sharing with anybody, that actually would attract people to you. And then as you know, I flew off to Nashville. I trained with a company called Story Brand. I became a story brand guide. I was a copywriter. I was helping people rewrite their websites, tell their brand story, tell their personal stories. I was doing all of this work. And then around 2021, I decided I wanted to change my model a bit, because I was working one-to-one. I was working with, sometimes they were solopreneurs, sometimes they were, small businesses and brands. But I could only ever work with 2 or 3 a month at tops, because it was quite a lot of work for me. It was like a done for you service. And I wanted to switch more I thought, how can I get this out to more people? Because I can see, just from watching people on social media and going to people's websites, I could see that a lot of business owners weren't doing this. They weren't sharing stories. So I thought, how do I get it out to more people? And I thought, well, the first thing I've got to do is get what I'm doing out of my head, and onto paper. Like, is it something I can show other people how to do? Or have you got to be in my head? Is it something that I'm kind of doing that, because it does feel very intuitive, and I sometimes used to say to clients, oh, that's the story we need to tell because I've got goosebumps, right? And if I've got goosebumps, then it's going to connect with other people too. So I thought, is this something I can teach other people to do? So I started getting my process out of my head and documenting it. And as I was working with clients, I was like, what am I doing? And what order do I do it in? And what am I looking out for? And what am I listening out for? And as I was going through this process, one day I got a message from the founder of Rethink Press, a publishing company that published business books. And she emailed me and said, why haven't you written a book yet? Like, I've seen what you're doing and it's great, but you haven't got a book. And it's like, you're right, I haven't got a book. And maybe this process that I've been getting out of my head and onto paper, maybe it's a book. So then I kind of started to think of it a bit differently. And it's like, okay, like, if this was a book, what would it look like? And how could I make it really practical? Because I wanted people to pick it up and actually work through it, not just theory. I'd actually come across some storytelling books that were all theory. One of them didn't even have any stories in it. Like, how can you write a book about storytelling and not have any stories in it? Whereas mine is packed full of stories. So yeah, I started to write the book. And then, of course, as I was writing the book, my process started to evolve, and I got clarity on what it looked like. And then I had a very successful launch in 2022, went to #1 in the UK and the US. And that was a turning point in my business, because that then enabled me to start to focus more on helping groups of people. I created a course, I created a group program. But it was getting that initial process out of my head and onto paper that allowed me to do that. And so that's how the book came about. And since then, thousands, tens of thousands of people have used my process to share more stories in their marketing, because that's what it's about, right? Is helping people, making it simple for business owners, because it doesn't need to be complicated. Making it simple for business owners to connect with the people that they really want to work with in a way that's very natural. Like you said, stories are one of the most powerful things that connects us as humans. My process is a simple way of doing that.
Yeah. I love that story, and congratulations on the success of the book so quickly.
Oh, thank you.
And we had Lucy was on the show a couple of months ago talking about how do you go about writing a book, what do you need to know. So anyone who's thinking, I want to write a book, go and check out Lucy.
Yeah, because now they've got Book Magic, AI. I'm sure that would be super useful.
And it follows the whole process as well, the marketing. I don't know about you, when I wrote the book, I was like, yeah, I've got the book out there. And then oh, now I have to market it.
I'm still marketing it 3.5 years later. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the beauty, isn't it? It's always there helping people, which I love. And that's incredible how many people you've helped as well. But you mentioned there that you were a story brand guide, and I love the book Story Brand. But as someone who is familiar with communication and storytelling, it made perfect sense. But I think as someone, when I'm taking my clients through the story brand framework and showing them how it works, there are parts of it that are quite abstract. And what I loved about your book is that it taking that story framework and making it so easy for people to apply that to a small business. So anyone can pick this up. And it adds that practical aspect to that as well. But I would love it if you don't mind, if you can share a little bit of insight into what makes a good story structure. Where do we begin to put a story into place?
Yeah. I mean, you can share any story, and this is, one of the first things that I kind of try to open people's eyes about is you really can share a story about anything. So you've got what I call your core story. Okay. That story of, this is why I do what I do. This is what's led me here, doing what I now do. It was that moment that I decided to walk away from a toxic relationship, or, I didn't want to work in corporate anymore, or whatever it is. So you've got that story. And most people, whether they're sharing it or not, they kind of know what that story is. If they were a guest on a podcast and somebody said, what's your story? What's led you here? They'd probably know how to tell that story. But that is one of millions and millions of stories that you have, right? So the first thing is just kind of getting people to realize that something you watched on telly could be the base of a story that you share, which I've done. I've told stories about Race Across the World, if you've seen that. And there was one, I was watching it one night, and two guys lost their map. I thought, that's a great story to share, right? What happens when you haven't got the map anymore and you don't know where you're going? And then it's just about keeping it simple. So, if I talk about the mistakes that I see people make, is they just cramming too much in. And actually in my group, I train people to look out for when they're doing that. And they often come into the group to ask for feedback, and they go, this is more than one story, isn't it, Susan? I'm like, yes, that's 5 stories you've got in there. Let's just tell one at a time, because keep it really nice and simple. One story, one message, one call to action. People will engage with that so much more than you trying to tell your life story in one post. So keeping it really, really simple. Keep it relatable. And the things that make a story relatable are actually how you were feeling, what you were thinking, rather than, well, this is what happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. So that's just a series of events, and people aren't necessarily going to connect with that emotionally. But when you start talking about how you were feeling, or what you were thinking, or what you were worried about or anxious about, or, how it felt when you made that change or walked away or whatever it was, that's the bit that's relatable, right?
I think that are the bits that's relatable, but also the parts where, right at the beginning when you said you got people to tell you about their story and
Mm.
you said words like, I was fascinated, you could really start to see the passion and why they were doing what they were doing. And it's those elements
Yes.
that help people see why you're doing it. And there's always a bit of distrust when you don't know someone's motivation.
Yes.
You like, well, why are you doing this? So
Yeah.
when you understand that motivation and you're on the same page and you can see their thought process, that all of that behind the logic, it
Mm.
adds that extra layer of trust. And so I think it's more than relatable. It's the key
Mm.
to bringing people along for the journey.
Absolutely. And stories do build trust, they really do, because you're getting to know somebody. I often will jump on a call with somebody that's maybe interested in coming to work with me, and almost always one of the first things they say is, "Oh, I love your stories, and I love how you talk about how you ordered your husband from the universe," or and, whatever it is, there'll be some story that I've shared or a couple of stories I've shared, and people will often tell me the stories that, really resonated with them or that they really connected with. So it does build that know, like, and trust that we need to be building, right? Stories are such a powerful way of doing that. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It goes deeper than what you're doing. It's, as you say, it's why you're doing it and you're helping other people to do, right? When you do the work that you do, what you're not just what you make happen.
Yeah. And what happens next?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
No.
So yeah, I mean they're the key things. Is keep it simple. Think about how you can make it relatable to your audience. And relevant as well. We don't want people thinking, well, that was a nice story, but I have no idea why she shared that. So we do want to think a little bit about, like, why are we sharing this story? What's the purpose behind it? What are we trying to do? Is it to build trust? Is it to people to feel connected with us? Or are we trying to share something we want our audience to reflect on, or shift a belief maybe, or present a different way of thinking, a new perspective? Or is it to attract people into our world? Is it to bring people closer to working with us? We can have lots of reasons for sharing the story, but we want to think about that before we start sharing it, so that we know where the story is going and we know how to take it where we want it to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I ran a while ago a magnetic messages challenge, and we touched on storytelling in that, but the first point was always like, well, who are you telling this
Yeah.
message or story to, and why?
Yeah.
Because if you don't know why, the
Mm.
audience is going to be like, as you say, no,
Yeah.
sharing this.
Yeah.
And there's always like communication is not just information; it's understanding how people are going to interact with that.
Yes.
So that will come from knowing why you're sharing it in the first
Yeah.
purpose. But
Yeah.
I love there that you just alluded to just how multi-purpose stories can be.
Mm.
Whatever your communication purpose, a story can lend itself brilliantly to that. So are there any situations, just thinking out loud on that point, where you wouldn't share a story?
Yeah, I always say to people, this is not about sharing your deepest, darkest secrets, right? Which is also why I made that point about, stories can be anything, and you are surrounded by things you could be sharing stories about all day long. So it's not necessarily that you've got to be really vulnerable. You've got to share something that's very personal. It's not about that at all. However, you can share stories that are personal in a way that doesn't feel like oversharing and can inspire people, right? We can share stories in a way that does what we want it to do. Again, thinking about the purpose, whether it is to, have people connect with us, have people understand us and our journey, or it's to inspire them and motivate them and show them what's possible for them. And we can do that with stories without getting into the real detail. I had somebody in my group last week say, I had a very difficult childhood, and I don't want to share the details of that, completely understandable. But I would like to talk about the way those experiences have made me who I am today. So I said, well, start there. Start with the strong, resilient woman that you are today and work backwards, thinking like, what were the insights? What were the lessons? What were the experiences? What did I take from those experiences, rather than what's the detail of the experiences, but what did I take? What gift did those experiences give me that I can now share? What might me sharing that, what might that unlock for someone else, So again, it's back to purpose and being relatable and relevant, rather than getting caught up in the, do I have to share all these details of something very difficult? No, you really don't. In fact, people are often quite surprised how little detail you need to share for a story to actually do what you want it to do.
Yeah. Yeah, on that point, I always look to songs. If you listen to a song, you get a whole, quite a deep story, but when you
Yeah.
actually look at the words they've
Yeah.
used, there's hardly any.
Yes.
So, as you said earlier, it's all about that feeling, what they were going through. And so you connect with that, and you almost, if you don't give too much detail, it gives the other person
Yes.
chance to fill that detail with their own experiences.
Exactly. Yes. It's actually more relatable when it's not so detailed, right? Because it's not the content itself. When I shared my story to 1,500 women in business, it wasn't the content really that people related to. And again, my story wasn't dramatic. You do not need to have some story fit for a Hollywood blockbuster film. It's actually the very ordinary stories of the ups and downs and what got you through the tough times that people relate to. So I didn't go into a lot of detail, but I shared enough about what got me through the tough times, what some of the challenges were and what I learned from it and how it helped me become the person I am today. That's what people connected with. And the other thing I always say to people is, you don't have to share anything that's raw, that you're in the middle of, that you're still healing from. Much better to wait until you've got some distance and you can share your story with that perspective of being able to kind of stand back from it a bit and look back and think about, what do I want to share from this? What insights or, what have I taken from it that maybe will help somebody else who's, on a similar journey or just is facing some kind of challenge at the moment.
Yeah. And I loved it, something you said there, look for the gift in the experience. I think that's just such a beautiful way of looking at it. And everything is an experience, as you said, from watching a TV show
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
to our actual life experiences.
Mhm.
What's the gift that we got from that? And sometimes that comes in retrospect. It's not necessarily obvious in the moment, but once you look at how you want to help people, well, what story can what I lived through, or what story would make it relatable, and they stick as well. Yeah, I remember what inspired me to get into public speaking was many years ago. I went to a women's network event, and this lady stood on stage, and she was talking about how she set up this sales agency from her garage, and she told the whole story about it. And then at the very, very end, she said, "Oh, and by the way, I'm blind." And then someone came on and helped her off stage. But she was already on stage when we got there, so we hadn't noticed that. But that was easily 20 odd years ago. And at one point, I was thinking, oh, maybe I should get someone to reach out and speak to people on the phone. And I just put in blind lady starts a sales agency, and I found her instantly.
Right.
So I remembered that story for 20 years until the point where I was considering her services. So I think these stories that we relate to just become really powerful and sticky.
Yeah, they are really sticky and memorable. And the other thing we do, as well as remember them, is we pass them on, right? We tell other people about the stories. Well, there's lots of examples in my book, but one of them was a stall in a craft market that I came across in Salisbury, and they had beautiful gift boxes. And then there was a sign on the table that said, "It only takes a moment to create a moment." So I read that, and then I looked up, and there was a young couple there with their son. And they started to tell me the story of how they had been through some tough challenges as a family, personally and professionally. But actually, when they look back, they realized it was those little moments that kept them all going, right? The foot rub or bringing someone a cup of tea or a hug or, some kind words. And they said, we realized that we got through everything as a family and as a strong unit because of those little moments that we were all there for each other. Do you know how many people I have told that story to? Unfortunately, they don't do the gift boxes anymore, but I just loved the story so much. And again, they didn't tell me the details. I had no idea what those challenges were. They didn't need to. There was enough of a story there to make me connect with it and also make me reflect on, actually, you're right. We're the same. We're a close family and we're there for each other. But do we always take the time out to show each other how grateful we are? Do we take the time out to create special moments? No, we probably could do more of that, right? So it made me reflect. It made me think. It made me feel very grateful for my family. So it made me feel something. I remember the story, even though that was probably 5 years ago now. And I'm still telling the story, even though they don't even have the company anymore. Right? That's how powerful storytelling is. You don't get that from somebody's sales page or, some slick elevator pitch that they've got. It's the stories that we remember and we pass on.
And I think they're also the things that differentiate us as well. So maybe there's 3 gift box companies, but you're going to recommend the one whose story you connect with.
100%. Yeah. They're the only stall in that market that day that I remember and that I talk about. And that's because of their story, not because of the gift boxes, which were beautiful, absolutely beautiful. But once I'd connected with them and their story, I wanted to buy from them. Like, I wanted to be a part of their story. I wanted to be a part of their journey.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So one thing you covered in your book, which I thought was brilliant, is why we don't tell stories, or the story we tell ourselves that stops us from telling our stories.
Yes.
Can you dive into that a little bit? Because I'm pretty sure up until now, everyone's nodding along, thinking, oh, yes, I should tell more stories. And they're going to put it on their to-do list. And then these little stories in our brain are going to blow up, and they're not going to take the action. So what typically are those stories, and how can we start to rewrite them in a way that's more helpful?
Yeah. I think, it's different for different people, but a lot of the time, the stories, they normally start, what if, right? What if I put my story out? What if I publish my story and, I don't know, people judge me? People, my ex-boss sees it, or the stories that we have going around in our head. Somebody said to me the other day, what do people think I'm sharing my story just because I want attention? Right? All of these things, really interesting. They will almost certainly go back to when we were kids, right? And we were told, don't show off, don't brag, don't be too confident, don't, make it all about you, don't be the center of attention, right? We hear all these messages when we're younger. Even if they're not said to us, we'll be hearing people saying it to other people. And we'll learn that actually we're not supposed to be the center of attention. We're not supposed to make it all about us, right? We're not supposed to talk about us all the time. And I don't recommend talking about ourselves all the time because that wouldn't work either. But a lot of the time, that holds us back as an adult. The other one I've noticed a lot of the time, if people have got any experience of being bullied as a child, or even, in a workspace, if they've got experience of being bullied, again, they'll obviously, it feels safer to not, put yourself out there, not be too visible. So when I started working with clients, I noticed that some people, and this is back when I was doing done for you services, some people I would give them the stories and everything ready, content plan, website, everything ready to go. And they wouldn't press send, right? They would hold back and procrastinate and like, oh, I'm going to get my graphic designer to, redo the branding. I need some more time to get some more images. And they would come to a point where I would think, no, there's something else going on, right? They're resisting it. And I get it. I get that it can feel scary. So I think the first thing is just noticing what that story in your head is, what you're telling yourself, what you're worried about. I used to have a chronic, absolutely severe, verging on a phobia of public speaking. Now, the thought of getting up on stage, I would shake, I would start sweating, trembling, I'd forget how to breathe, sweaty palms, my brain would go blank. And I had a client who's a clinical psychologist, and I was talking to her about it. And she said, the problem is that you're making it all about you, right? You're saying, what if they don't like me? What if they don't like my talk? What if, that guy over there has got his arms crossed and he's frowning? What if he thinks I'm rubbish? All of these things that are going through our head. And she said, of course you're going to hold back. Of course it's going to be scary if that's the story that you're running all the time. So she encouraged me to think about how I could not make it about me, make it about the people that I'm here to help, right? So the business owner who got up this morning and is really feeling low because their content just isn't converting, right? They're not getting the clients, or they're not getting the right clients, and the work's not lighting them up, and they're starting to get very anxious about, where the next client's going to come from. And they've tried all the marketing things and they think they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, and they're doing their blog and they're doing, their emails, but it's just not connecting and they're not growing their business. What if they're at that talk that I'm going to give today? And what if I say something in my talk and it just changes, that have a little aha moment, and they go away, whether or not they ever come and work with me, but they go away and they start to think about, maybe they go read my book and they think, maybe this is the missing piece. Maybe I need to share more stories. And what if they start sharing stories and their business grows, right? And they start connecting with people and their business looks very different 12 months later. What if me getting up on stage could be about them and not about me? And what if I just stopped all the thoughts about, what if people don't like me? What if it's not about me? Because actually what people think is, I have no idea. I'm never going to know. So I'm only making assumptions anyway, and I'm only torturing myself with thoughts like that, right? Which are not helpful, and they're not putting me in a good place. They're not serving me, those stories. So I changed them all. I stopped. Literally, if I feel a what if coming into my head, what if, I've posted enough today? What if I'm talking about my offer too much? What if I get up on stage and some people don't like me? The minute I hear those thoughts coming in, I just stop them and I remind myself why I'm doing this, who I'm doing it for. I think about the people I have helped, but more importantly, I think about the people who haven't even come across me yet. And I've got to be visible. I've got to post. I've got to write another email. I've got to go and talk at another event so that they can find me and get the help that they need to start sharing stories and, turn things around so that they do start attracting more of the people they love working with. So it's that intentional noticing what the story is and changing it. And a really good question to just ask is this thought helpful? Like, is it putting me in a good place? Does it make me feel good about posting this story or sending this email? And if it doesn't, then it's probably a story that's you can change, or it's a story that you can change, right? It's probably a story that you need to have a look at and think, okay, what would be a better story? And a better story really starts with focusing on who your ideal client is, why you're showing up, who you're showing up for, and what you are making possible for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And it's so important to, as I say, be aware of those stories and challenge them, then choose something for. Yeah. The other question I quite like is this true?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Is it?
Yeah.
I think that's really true.
Really? Yeah.
I agree with saying, half the time what you're telling yourself is just pure assumption. Yeah. And we don't really know it's true at all.
No.
And then like
that person sitting with their arm folded frowning, that's just the way they look, right? They're listening, they're processing, and almost every time they'll be the one that comes up to me afterwards and says, that was great. That was really good. I love it, So I stopped making assumptions about what people are thinking. Most people won't see your posts. Most people won't open your emails, right? So you've got to do it lots. You can share the same story several times and still most people won't hear it, won't, seen it every time. So a lot of the stuff we're telling ourselves, you're right, it's not true, and it's definitely not helpful.
Yeah. And that person at the front looking grumpy, that's probably me. I we were talking with Jennifer a couple of weeks ago about, as an introvert, I am really all in on concentrating on what you're saying and pressing that. And so my face is blank. And there's so many people say, oh, have I really upset you? No,
Yeah.
no. She said something really good. That's why I look really grumpy.
Yes, exactly. And the more I do it, the more I realize, and now I stop when I've said something in a talk. I'll stop and I'll let people process it, and I'll stand there for a minute. You as you become more relaxed and you realize actually people are just taking it in. They're just listening. They're just processing. And you just stop making it about you.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when I was getting ready for my TED talk and I was working with my speech coach, and he was like, if the audience is quiet, that's a really good thing. Don't think that it's because they're not listening or whatever. And you said there about the story, it's your story, but at the same time, it's not your story. And I used to work for 2 different TEDx events, coaching speakers, and they were felt quite vulnerable sharing their story because I'm like, well, I don't want it to be all about me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I say, your story isn't about you. It's about you, as we were saying earlier, that gift in your experience that you can use to help other people and for them to be able to use gift, and stories are just a great way of doing that. So I love that you highlighted that as well, but which comes to another part of your book, which I really like that you covered. And it's on your website, it's the most visited page. It's the About Me page.
Yeah.
And I think the name of this page being an About Me page makes people think, oh, it has to be all about me. It's all about my story. But it should be more about how I help you. It's all about the client. But do you have any advice? And I guess this comes back to the core story that you were talking about right at the very beginning on how do you take your story and make it really relevant to your dream client and then use that on your About Me page so that people understand who you are, but also feel engaged and related and part of that story.
Yeah. It's a really good point because I've just spent 10 minutes saying it's not about you. And then I'm telling you to go share your personal stories. So your story is about you because you're telling a story about yourself, but it's not for you, right? You're not sharing the story for yourself. You're not sharing the story to brag or show off or get attention, although you are kind of sharing it to get attention, but the right attention from the right people. So it's the intention behind, again, why you're sharing the story. So your About page is an opportunity for you to share who you are. And the rule of thumb I always use is your homepage needs to be your customer story, right? When somebody lands on the homepage, they don't want to immediately start hearing about you and what you've done and what awards you've won and all of those kind of things, which was quite the traditional way of doing a website, right? It was tend to be a big picture of the person and start talking about them straight away. Your homepage, really, you want to be telling the customer story, like who they are, where they're at, what they want, what's in the way of them having that, where they want to get to, so that they see immediately, like they see themselves in that story. They're like, yes, that's me. She gets it. That's my story. And you're right. That is that journey I want to go on. I want to have that ending to my story. Your homepage is the opportunity for you to introduce yourself as the person that can take them on that journey, right? So you're the guide in this story, right? You're the Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're Yoda. You're not the hero of the story. You're the guide. So the About page is where you really introduce yourself as the guide. So yes, you want to share your story, but again, it just goes back to making it relatable to the specific people that you want to attract more of, right? So think about where they're at, think about how they're feeling, think about, what challenges they've got at the moment, where they're on in their journey. And then you can make your story really speak to that, really tuning into where they're at and where they're trying to get to. So it's telling your story, absolutely, but in a way that shows people what you can help them do, what's possible for them, how you can be that guide that takes them on that journey.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And thank you for highlighting about the homepage as well, because it's a classic mistake. And
Yeah.
particularly for coaches or people who have spent a long time gathering all these certifications and letters
Yes.
to their name, and
Yeah.
they think that's what makes them valuable. But
Yeah.
the first question your client has is, what's in it for me? So they need to know that first, and then know your story. Who is this person to guide me? Does it
Mm,
feel like a good fit? And
mm,
then what makes them qualified is kind of
mm.
way down. They will want to know that, but later. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You don't start the story with the guide, right? You start the story with Luke Skywalker, and you understand the problem is and what the challenge is and where he's trying to get to, and then you see where he's flawed. You see where, he can't do this on his own. He doesn't know how to do this. And so then you introduce the guide into the story, right? Whether that's Mary Poppins, whether that's, whoever it is, you bring that guide character into the story, and that's who you want to be in their story, is that guide. Because we all need guides on our journey, right? We all in lots of aspects of our life. You might have a personal trainer, you might work with a nutritionist, you might have a business coach or a life coach or a mindset coach, or a teacher. So there's lots of people in our life who are actually playing that guide role, and that's very different from somebody who, like you say, it's about leading with qualifications and letters after their name, and kind of almost like introducing themselves before we've really shown the client that we understand who they are and what their story is and where they are on their journey. And even before that, what's in it for me, it's like we need to show them that they are the people we're talking to. We get who you are and where you're at and what you want and what the challenge is. We need to let them know that we know that and we understand that, even before we get to how we can help them.
Yeah. And which also highlights that we need to know who they are,
Yes.
because it's not always obvious that you need to know your dream clients. If you're someone like a coach, yes, you can be helping everybody, but not everyone's going to be a dream client.
No.
So you have to know who that person is so you can really address it. And as you say, the more of their situation you can put into your story, the more relatable it's going to become, and the more you're going to position yourself as their guide. So it all comes together beautifully once you know you and your value, you understand who their clients are, and then you can create these stories. You mentioned earlier that stories are everywhere. They're all
Yeah.
around us, and I totally agree. But I was curious if there is any favorite sources that you or your clients helpful to start with.
Well, the process in my book really takes you through that step by step. So, the first one is your personal story. So, your experiences, your insights, your lessons, your perspective, your ideas, your values, your experiences, everything that makes you you. So, you can look back and think about moments on the journey, lessons, all sorts of things. But you can also look at the present and what's going on around you, and behind the scenes, and like I said, television stuff, when you're reading, listening, all that. My radar is always on all the time, right? So I'm seeing stories and seeing opportunities to share stories all the time. My daughter ran the London Marathon last year, and honestly, I got so much content out of that, because watching her go through her training and then on the day, and there were so many stories in there that I could share, and make them really relevant to my ideal client. Um, so yes, and then there's your vision and where you want to go, and there's the future. So there's your personal stories, right? Then there's your business stories. So why your business exists, what it exists to do, the problem it exists to solve. If your business was a storyteller, what stories would it share? That business journey that you've been on, how you've ended up here doing what you now do. Maybe the belief behind your business, right? Your values, all of those things can be wrapped up in your business stories. And then you've got your customer story, which is a really important integral piece of the puzzle, like you said, is really understanding their story so that you can share that story, right? That you can show people that you understand who they are. Then you've got your why, and there's loads of stories about why you do what you do. You've got your people, which is where we go even deeper into who your specific people are, whether you want a niche. And this often comes out of people's stories, right? As they're unpacking their personal story and their business story, they often get aha moments and they think, that's who I want to work with. They're the people that really, I really want to serve, that I feel excited to work with. And then we've got your value, which is obviously very aligned with the work that you do. And by your value, I mean the value to your ideal client of what you help them do, what you help them achieve, who you help them become. And there's a ton of stories in there, right, about the work that you do and what you help other people do. And then there's the sweet spot in the middle, which is where everything feels aligned and you've got your kind of golden threads. And as you were talking about, it's connected and you can see how your story connects to their story. And you can find those common themes. And so all that whole process we're looking for stories all the time that we can share that help to communicate all of those things. And people usually come out of the process going, Lord, I've got a whole notebook full of ideas of stories that I can be sharing. But I think those stories that just show people who you are, the journey you've been on, why you do what you do, but also just, what you bring to the table, your unique blend, why it matters, what's important. And all of those things are those little golden threads that you're putting out, but the right people can pick up and say, yeah, that's someone that I really feel connected to and that I would be drawn to working with.
Yeah, thank you. And as you say, it's all in your book, and which is why I love just how practical it was. You can really just follow along step by step and develop everything that we've talked about today. So I encourage everyone to go out and get that.
Oh, thank you.
And also, you've started, or we're about to start a new venture that's going to add even more value to the book through your podcast as well.
Yes.
Can you give us any insights as to what people can expect from your podcast?
Yeah. So same name, The Business of Stories with Susan Payton. And so I'm going to start by taking people through my process step by step. So I got the, first couple of episodes and then the next 7 episodes are literally me taking step by step because, of course, my process has evolved. The book came out 3.5 years ago. And since then, I've worked with hundreds of business owners and taken them through the process. So it's evolved. I've got, new stories to share, great examples to share because, most people are like me and they learn from examples and stories. And it's such a great way of teaching what you teach in a really practical way. So yeah, and then there's a bit of mindset stuff thrown in because obviously I talk a lot about, like you said, that story in your head and how important that is, and a bit of business stuff thrown in because I think that for business owners, it's really inspiring to hear how other people have got through tough stuff, right? But business is hard. Running your own business is hard. It really is a roller coaster of a journey of ups and downs and bumps and bruises along the way. And it's those stories of how other people got through the tough times, got through the challenges, came out the other side, share what they've learned from it, what it enabled them to do. Those stories are so inspiring and they really help people to see that they're not alone, that they are on track, but this is completely normal, that they're good to keep going.
Yeah, I love what you said there. Because we've kind of talked about stories as promoting your business and attracting clients. But what you alluded to there is they can feature in every part of your process and they can add value to the way you coach your clients, the way you teach, the way you help people get results in that transformation, because they're so relatable and memorable and everything we talked about so far. So I love that you just raised that there as well. So I'm really looking forward to listening to your podcast.
Thank you very much. I am very excited about doing it. I'm 10 episodes in and yeah, it's very exciting. It's a new way of me, sharing some more of the stuff I've learned since I wrote the book.
Yeah, fantastic. Susan, thank you so much for everything
thank
you've shared today. It's been a real masterclass. If people want to know more about you and your process and the business stories, where's the best place for them to go to?
Well, my website is thebusinessofstories.com. You can download my book on there if you want to for free. I've also got a 5-day challenge coming up, which is, exciting. I run a couple of those a year and they're always a lot of fun. It's completely free to take part. You learn a very simple 5-step process for putting a compelling story together for your ideal clients. But it's all on my website. If you go to thebusinessofstories.com, you will find everything on there. I'm also on Facebook and LinkedIn, Susan Payton UK.
Fantastic. Susan, thank you again for joining us today.
you.
Really enjoyed this discussion.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. I hope you're leaving feeling a little braver about sharing your stories, growing your network, and building real relationships with your dream clients. If you enjoyed this conversation, I'd love to know what resonated with you most and what steps you're going to take. You can find me at LinkedIn at Melitta. That's Melitta with 2 T's. And please do share this episode with another big-hearted entrepreneur who has amazing stories to share that can be growing their business and helping more people at the same time. To turn today's insights into practical actions, go to melittacampbell.com/podcast, navigate to this episode, and inside on the show notes page, right at the top, you'll find my AI twin, Valora, ready to help you apply Susan's advice to your current business challenges and turn those into practical steps that you can take straight away to grow your business. I'm Melitta Campbell, your business coach and value whisperer, and I look forward to seeing you again in the next episode next Wednesday. Bye.